What's going on, people? I wanted to make this video to talk about the biggest differences I've seen between the United States and Russia after living in Russia for a few months now. And we'll try to talk about the absolute biggest or most shocking things that I've seen that differentiate the two countries. And we'll try to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of both in essence. And yeah, we'll get right into it. So I think for most people, whenever they think of Russia, they think that it's this like super outdated Soviet country from the 80s, maybe earlier, I don't know. And that somehow some people still think that the Russian country, the country as a whole, like they still don't have toilets, and they live in huts in the middle of nowhere. And while there are people that like that kind of lifestyle, like I guess you would consider off-grid living in America, they don't have in many cases they're actually much more advanced, like tech-wise, than America is. And one such example is when we set up two examples. One, when we went to a restaurant and go to pay, at the end of the bill, you know, first they'll come over with their little payment processor. They'll drop it at the table, you'll pay at the table, and then you also have the option to tip your server directly instead of sharing tips evenly throughout the entire restaurant, which is unfair to the server. If you do decide to leave a tip in Russia, your server has waitress has a profile picture that's tied directly to your table. So you scan the QR code and you can leave them a tip directly. They have their profile picture, so you know it's going directly to them. And I actually appreciate that. In some cases, they might even have like a little description or bio about who they are, so you get to know them a bit more. But outside of that, the banking system is actually very efficient here in many cases. Like there's some annoyances like small fees if you decide to pay through phone numbers, but like setting up a bank account, one of the more popular banks is Tinkoff. They will come to you to set up your account. They'll literally get in a car. They have like a employee that his or her whole job is to drive around to everyone in the city and set up an account with them at their place of residence, whether that's the apartment that they live at or at their house. And in many cases, they can bring like a safe deposit box for you to store valuables in. And I haven't done that, but anyway, they come to you, they set up your account with you, and it's a lot more different of an experience than you going directly to the bank, because Tinkoff is like an online bank. They don't have any physical stores. I think they might have some in Moscow, but they're almost entirely operated online. So meaning you would set up your account, and they have ATMs throughout the city, but it's an extremely convenient way to bank. And I'm a huge fan of that, actually, because if I'm depositing cash, I can go to one of their ATMs and it's very efficient on that. But on the sense of setting up an account, you can do it in like 5 minutes with them, and really straightforward. I mean, I like the fact that you can talk to someone in person, but not only going to a bank, but them coming to you, because I'm a huge fan to save some time. And if they can come to me, that that makes life easy, instead of having to take time out of my day to like go to a physical location. So anyway, outside of that, it's really nice too, because a lot of the banks now, you can send money directly through someone's phone number, similar to like Venmo or PayPal, but through the actual bank itself. And in many cases, it's free. Now, there are some fees going from one bank to another if you're paying through that phone number. But the nice thing is there's no wait time. There's no transfer time where it's like 1 to 3 business days for the money to hit that account if you're doing it in Russia. So a lot of times you can send money to someone else, they get it immediately, and in many cases there's no fees. So, you know, there's a lot of if this then that's, where if you send a certain amount over a certain dollar value or a certain ruble amount, then yeah, you will pay a commission or you will pay a fee. But you know, that's that's in the thousands of US dollars when you get to that point where you pay fees. Anyway, very efficient, which I am a huge fan of. And their bigger banks are similar to what United States has, where you have like Wells Fargo or maybe Chase Bank, where they're a little bit more inconvenient to work with because they're so big. They have a lot more hoops to jump through. So in order for you to deposit a certain amount, you can only deposit like, I think it's 1 million rubles in a month, which is like 10,000 US dollars. So, if you're someone that's planning on coming here from the States, don't think that you can get everything over in like one swift movement and deposit everything all at once. So a little inconvenient in some ways, but that's definitely a big difference, is just the tech advantages, I'd say, the ease of using money, at least on that sense. Outside of that, far and away, one of the biggest eye-opening experiences that you'll have is the moment you try any food here. It's a lot more clean products. You won't see any organic products in Russia because everything is classified as organic. There's no GMO used in the products here. So you eat the chicken or you eat the beef, it's as pure as it comes, and there's not a lot of chemicals that are put into it, at least not compared to the States. So that was a big shock. But by far, and I talk about this I think in every video, is the fact that the dairy products are from the source. They're not put through all these chemicals and pasteurized and made to where they can last for 2 to 3 weeks. Just so you guys are aware, that's not natural for milk to last weeks and weeks at a time. If it's pure and natural, it should only last a couple days. So that's something that was new to us, is whenever our daughter drinks milk from a bottle, if it spills even one drop, it smells so bad because it's the real stuff, and it's not like this watered down version of milk. Same thing with butter. My favorite meal right now at this moment is bread with butter. Couldn't be more simple. Maybe some coffee in the morning. You give me that, I could probably live a lifetime off of that stuff in Russia. It's also interesting because they fold the butter here, so it's like whenever you cut it, it falls apart whenever you cut, with a butter knife. And it's new to me because I'm used to it just staying together like one solid piece. But the fat percentage is like 72 to 82%, something like that. So I don't know how I would love to go to like a butter factory and see how they do it, but they fold the butter in, which is really interesting. So anyway, outside of that, the really, really big difference for me coming from the States is just the accessibility to transport from place to place. If you don't have a car in the States, you're out of luck, really. Whereas in Russia, if you don't have a car, you're fine. Like my wife's grandma has never had a car. She's never needed a car because she can walk everywhere she wants to go. And if you don't want to walk, you can take a bus. If you don't want to take a bus, you could take a taxi. If you don't want to take a taxi and you want to go to Moscow, you could take a train. Or you want to go to St. Petersburg, you take a train. It's the options to get around from place to place are a lot more abundant, which I genuinely appreciate, because it's a lot nicer to be able to travel from place to place pretty quickly. Like I can take I can take a bus to the city center in Yaroslavl in like 10 minutes, and it's 34 rubles right now, so like 40 cents to take a bus one way. So less than $1 to take a 20-minute round trip bus ride. And there's a bus every 3 to 5 minutes on every stop, which is great. So anyway, options are definitely abundant here to be able to get around from place to place. And my arm's getting tired, so give me a second. So another big one that I was not used to or didn't even think about until I got here is that for one, it's a much more family-centered country. I think if you're wanting to raise a family and raise them in the way God intended, which is a man and a woman raising a family, traditionally, this is the place for you. But one, it's family-centered, but it's also very centered around like staying healthy and active, because every single corner that I can find, at least in Yaroslavl, has some kind of like calisthenics, outdoor fitness area for people to move around and stay active. Like, definitely a big difference. Coming to Russia, I was expecting there were to be more gyms. There was going to be more gyms available, because in America it seems like you've got gyms everywhere, which is great. I think that's great to have, but you do need a car to get there for the most part, unless you of course buy something very, very close. But here there are not a lot of gyms as far as like physical commercial gyms where you have a membership and you go. There's some like maybe boxing classes or women's fitness classes, or like an actual complex that's like your big gym that you think of. Those are maybe every 15-minute walks apart, whatever that comes out to, maybe like 3 kilometers. Every 3 kilometers or so you have a bigger gym, which is totally fine. But for the people that don't have cars, it's a lot harder to get to those, especially when it's going to be snowing all the time. So for people that need to walk somewhere, there's a ton of outdoor gyms in most Russian cities. And I mean, I haven't been all over, so I can't attest to other cities out there, but I'm sure the same could be said for other parts of Russia. But it seems to be a very like health-centered place where, you know, you can bring your kids out to walk. There's parks all over the place. Every single day that I go to walk, there's got to be hundreds of families walking around. If not the husband and wife, it's definitely the wife is walking around with their kids. And it's just nice to see, because in the States, most of the people walking in the parks are retired, more elder people that have time to kill. It doesn't seem to be as common of a activity to go out with your family to the park and like walk around for fun. Now, I'm saying that as a blanket statement, because there's of course plenty of people in America that do this, but it's much more widely accepted that if you have time to kill, you'll go with your family to the park or go walk around, just go clear your mind and go outside and walk, which again is just a big shock to me, because I'm used to everyone hanging out at your house, or like you don't really go out when you're bored. But when I'm bored here, instead of sitting on the couch and watching TV or watching YouTube, I'll go outside and walk, because I feel like it's a better way to like engage your mind, or I'll go read or something. It just seems that it's much more widely accepted here to have outdoor activities, presuming the weather is decent, which is my next point. One of the biggest differences, far and away, is the weather. So yeah, it's absolutely going to be colder here in the winter months, and it starts getting cold around like October, November, and then it's going to get warm right around like April, May time. So you've got a good while for the weather to clear up. But you know, it is what it is. It's nothing you can't get used to. You can always put more clothes on. Coming from Texas, I'm used to the weather being extremely hot, so can't really walk around naked in Texas. But of course you could always go to Crimea, where you have more like warm weather year round, or warmer temperatures. I think right now it's 35 Celsius or 30 Celsius, which is 60, like 90 Fahrenheit, something like that, like high 80s, low 90s. And that's great to see too. But other than that, I mean, the other nice thing that's really helpful, extremely helpful, is the medical assistance here, because very recently my wife's brother had to go to the hospital, and when I heard that, I mean, it was before we came here, but he needed an ambulance. And to me, my first reaction is like, where is that money going to come from? Because that's going to be extremely expensive to cover that bill. And I think it would be, I don't know, $2,000 or $3,000 in the States. And the ambulance, while it will take a while to get to you because it's free, but they didn't have to pay anything. It was like a 45-minute wait for the ambulance to get there. And yeah, it was completely free. So definitely a big shock on that end, because I'm used to gearing up and preparing for like a massive expense whenever it comes to medical stuff. So, you know, I'm while there's plenty of great things about Russia, there's some not so great things, which again, if you're looking for it, you'll find it. Any country has flaws, which I understand. But one thing is for sure, this is not this scary, dark, evil place that people make it out to seem. And I've been living here for a few months now. I've been to Russia 6 times prior to this. And I mean, the first time I came, I had this expectation that people were driving tanks in the streets. I had expectations that people were like shooting each other all the time. And it was just this extremely dangerous place that you don't leave your house. But to me, the opposite is true, because in America, 2 weeks before we officially packed up and sold off everything and came out here permanently, there was a shooting at the grocery store 3 minutes from our house. And the scary part is, my initial reaction was, you know, fear, but then it's like, oh well, it happens, which is an unnatural reaction because it happens so often in the States where there's some kind of shooting or dangerous, violent situation, and you just get used to it. Like, that is ridiculous to think that we're supposed to be conditioned to not react to some terrible events. Like, it's disappointing that this is what the States have come to, where it's like dangerous enough to where you can't voice your opinion. So there goes your freedom of speech. I've seen so many people get in danger or hurt for saying something that is the truth. And you know, people in my comments will often say like, there's no freedom of speech in Russia. If you're not if you're not a mean person, if you're an honest person that wants to do the right thing and doesn't try to cause any trouble, you'll be fine in Russia. But if you're an asshole, you're going to get in trouble, just like you would in the States. So it's really nothing different. Like, this whole freedom of speech thing, the people that actually speak the truth in America will get in big trouble. And it's ironic to me to think that that's the country that people are extremely proud of. And I really, really hope that things turn around there in the future, but I just have no idea what the next 5-10 years look like. Maybe 20-25 years ago, America was the place to be, but all these sanctions have really shot themselves in the foot, and they've caused a lot more harm than good. And I love the people of America. I think the government is the problem at this point. And it's unfortunate, because it was a beautiful place, and I loved America and the States for many reasons, but right now it's not the most feasible place to raise a family unless you have some kind of business, or you own a ton of properties, or you have a ton of income coming in. Otherwise, there's definitely better places out there that you can go to live a good life. And it is raining right now, so I'm going to go home. But yeah, I don't think that there's a lot of reasons that the States is the place for a lot of people anymore. So I'm not saying to pack your bags and move to Russia. That'd be a bit extreme. You definitely would need some sort of visa situation, either marrying a spouse or working in Russia. There's a lot more of a structure that you'll need set up here to just up and go. It's not like America where millions of people can cross the border every year and have no consequences. Like, in order to be here officially, there's a ton of red tape that you need to go through, which I appreciate because it eliminates a lot of crime. And yes, of course, people sneak through, but eventually they get caught and they get sent back, whereas we don't really have much in place in the States. So biggest differences for sure. I hope that gave some clarity. And actually, I do have another. So on the topic of big differences, there was one realization that I came across, and it was just, you get used to life here, whereas you don't need this large house. I think the American dream, everyone thinks that you have like these really crazy cars and these massive houses, and I'm very grateful for the house that we had in the States. It was very comfortable, it was very spacious, but truth be told, like, we did not need that house. It was a little too big for our family, and it was unnecessary. It's just one of those things that you get conditioned to think in the States that that's how life will go, is you just keep upgrading and you keep going and going and going and getting bigger things. And in Russia, a comfortable life and a comfortable house or apartment, I mean, our apartments that we were looking to get was anywhere between 80 and 100 square meters. So pretty much half of what our house in America was, and plenty of space to live in. And yes, it is an apartment, so it's not going to be as spacious as a house. You can definitely get some country houses and what are called dachas in the more like the rural areas of Russia, and you can build a big house, you can do all that stuff, but you don't need it. You don't need all this stuff to be happy here. And I think, you know, I wouldn't consider anyone that's either wanting to move or just in general, I wouldn't try to like move somewhere else to fix all your problems. I mean, your happiness is internal. So if you're planning on bringing your baggage with you, it's going to change you entirely. Like, leave your ego at the door. Things here are going to take a lot longer to get done. But at the same time, I think for the right reasons, someone that moves here will be a lot happier because your family will be taken care of. You're going to have a lot more safe conditions to live. And, you know, there's a lot of systems in place to make sure that you have everything you need to live a good life. And it's not such a transactional country where if you don't have a lot of money, you're thrown out on the street. Like, there's systems in place to make sure that everyone is taken care of, which I'm a huge proponent of. But yeah, I mean, with that in mind, I was going to mention like housing quality. The build quality here is exponentially better, and I've mentioned this on a couple videos in the past. But one of the nice things that I've come to realize is I'm so used to paper thin walls where you can hear your neighbor from 5 doors down. Like, you can hear them sneeze or breathe even, because the walls are so thin, because they're trying to build as many houses as possible in America. They have what's called cookie cutter homes, where it's, you know, you've got like 100 houses that are built the exact same way, maybe a little bit different in terms of floor plan, or maybe it's the exact same floor plan all the way through. And eventually what happens is you have all these houses that are built as cheap as possible, as quickly as possible. So there's absolutely some issues with the quality. So a lot of houses will, they'll break down very quickly, and they're very, very cheap to get. And they're not even worth it in the grand scheme of things, because if you're gonna buy something, you might as well buy something that's well built. And like a very nice quality house here with brick and aerated concrete and just a ton of insulation to make sure that not only the weather stays out and you don't even need to run AC if you don't want to, you'll also have a lot of sound protection from you to the next person or the next resident in the apartment or the next pass over from you. Like, if you don't open the windows, you might not even be able to hear anything, which is a blessing. I am not used to that. Coming from America, the housing quality is wildly different. It feels like you're buying these expensive houses made of paper, whereas here it's like extremely thick concrete walls for the most part. I don't know about new builds exactly, but the houses and the apartments that I've seen personally is just a wildly different experience. So, you know, that was something that was really different for me too. But other than that, I think one other big thought is the people here really respect themselves, and they take care of themselves. Everyone is, you know, they do their best to keep up with their hygiene and their physical appearances. And I'm definitely bringing a lot of the standard stereotypes in. I'm wearing a tank top and shorts and flip-flops right now, whereas everyone else is a little bit more dressed up than me. But it's just interesting to see people walk around and like take care of themselves, dress nicely whenever you go out. Like, women wear makeup and dress professionally for the most part. Obviously younger generations not so much, but people that go out and about, I think they look like they're ready to go out to somewhere nice. And it looks like everyone's going out to dinner all the time based on what they're wearing and how they made themselves look. It doesn't look like they just woke up and put on their sweatpants and went to the, you know, grocery store, as I see all the time. I feel like people respect themselves much more. They have more confidence in themselves. They're more direct. They ask for what they want, and they don't just kind of beat around the bush, taking 20 minutes to get to the point and answer a question. To that point though, if you ask someone what they think or how was their day, they'll tell you. If you have 20 minutes, they'll tell you every little detail about their life in Russia. Whereas in America, if you ask someone about their day or how are you doing, it's just a canned response. They'll just say good, you know, everything is fine, and you'll go on, and that's it. It's just like, it's so ingenuine or disingenuine that no one really actually cares about other people in public. Whereas if you ask someone how they're doing in Russia, they'll give you every little detail. And it's interesting because I'm not used to this. But I'm gonna go home right now, and a couple other thoughts that I have. Just got home, and wrapping this up with two final thoughts. One of the things that was really a big shock whenever we came from the States to Russia is that there is a lot more systems in place for you to raise a family, more specifically in like daycare and just schooling as a whole. So schooling is very affordable, but our daycare will be free once we get all of our documents together and we can send our daughter to daycare and eventually kindergarten. Like, all of that is provided at no cost to us, which is a huge blessing because my wife, her income in the States, really all of it was, at the end of all expenses, would go entirely to daycare. Like, we would be able to cover groceries and then daycare with her income, and there would be no leftover money. Whereas here, like, you don't have any of the daycare expenses, which is huge. So again, for raising families, Russia wins in my book for sure on that end. And then one other thing, I don't know if this is exactly true as a generic blanket statement, but it seems to be that the Russian culture is a lot more artistic and expressive with their feelings, and they seem to be a little bit more poetic. Like, there's a lot of readers. There's a lot of people that read novels. There's a lot of really good artists out here that, at least I've seen. Like, I could turn the camera right now. There's 6 people outside drawing and painting and doing portraits of flowers nearby. And it's nice to see. I mean, you see a ton of that, at least where I'm at. Maybe it's just where I'm at, but it seems to be a lot more of an artistic mindset, as at least when I'm looking at it from the sense of to the States. Of course, that could just be city dependent, but it seems to be that there's a lot of poets, artists, and it seems to be a fairly artistic culture. in Russia. I'm not saying it's like the most artistic in the whole world, but it seems like people are very expressive. They're also well educated. The schooling system is a lot more difficult here. I feel like if you point on a map and ask someone to tell you where that country is, they'll have a better success rate than in the States, where some people can't even tell you where Canada is on a map, which is insane. But that's some of the biggest thoughts that I could come up with as far as the differences between the United States and Russia. If you feel like I missed something, or if I'm way off the mark, or you want to correct me, feel free to. I'm not saying I'm a genius, but this is exactly what I've noticed since I've come to Russia. And these are my experiences, especially from the viewpoint of the lens of raising a family. I have a daughter, and these are the values that are important to me. But if you have some thoughts, definitely leave them. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing, commenting, share it with someone that might want to see these types of videos, and I will catch you on the next one. God bless, and stay tuned.